A 300-pound bouncer throws a homeless veteran into the rain-soaked street, kicks his service dog in the ribs, and laughs as the man crawls through puddles trying to shield the injured animal. The crowd outside the downtown nightclub films it on their phones, but no one intervenes. No one helps. The bouncer doesn't know that the man in the leather jacket watching from across the street is a Navy SEAL with his own military working dog. Doesn't know that what he just did will cost him everything. Doesn't know that sometimes the person you least expect is exactly the person you should fear most. Before we begin, tell us where you are watching from, and if this story touches your heart, please subscribe for more stories of courage, justice, and the warriors who protect those who cannot protect themselves. His name was Daniel Cortez, and at 41 years old, he looked at least a decade older. The kind of aging that came not from time but from trauma, from sleeping on concrete, from skipped meals, from the weight of invisible wounds that never healed. His hair was dark brown streaked with premature gray, long enough to touch his collar, unwashed for days. His eyes were brown, deep-set, with a 1,000-yard stare of someone who'd seen too much and couldn't unsee it. His face was weathered, lined, with a scar running through his left eyebrow, a souvenir from Fallujah that he never talked about. He wore layers. That's what you did when you lived on the streets. A thermal undershirt beneath a faded Marine Corps hoodie, beneath a surplus military jacket with the name taped long since removed. Cargo pants that had seen better years, reinforced at the knees with duct tape. Boots that were falling apart, but still held together because boots were survival. A backpack that contained everything he owned, spare socks, a water bottle, a tin of dog food, a photograph of his daughter he hadn't seen in 3 years, and medications from the VA he couldn't always afford to refill. It was a Friday night in late November in Charleston, South Carolina. The kind of night when the temperature dropped from pleasant to cold the moment the sun set, when humidity turned rain into something that soaked through layers and settled into your bones. The historic district was alive with weekend energy. Tourists and college students flooding the bars and restaurants that lined the cobblestone streets. Live music spilling from open doorways. The smell of fried seafood and expensive cocktails mixing with exhaust fumes and the salt-tinged air that blew in from the harbor. Daniel didn't belong here. That much was clear from the way people's eyes slid past him, the way they gave him a wide berth on the sidewalk, the way mothers pulled their children closer when he walked by. He was invisible and hypervisible at the same time, ignored until someone decided he was a problem. Then suddenly he was the only thing they could see. He was hungry. That was the immediate reality. He hadn't eaten since yesterday morning. A gas station breakfast sandwich someone had left half-finished on a bench. His stomach cramped with emptiness, but that was familiar. The body adapted. You stopped feeling hunger as pain and started feeling it as a dull, constant presence, like tinnitus or the ringing in his ears from too many explosions without proper hearing protection. But he wasn't looking for food. Not for himself. He was looking for help for Sargent. The dog walking beside him was a German Shepherd, 10 years old, brindle coat that had once been lustrous, but was now dull and patchy. Sargent was thin, ribs visible beneath his fur, hip bones prominent, but his eyes were still alert, still tracking movement with the discipline of a trained military working dog. Because that's what he'd been once. Daniel's partner in the Marines, his K-9 handler assignment, the animal that had saved his life twice in Ramadi by detecting IEDs before they could detonate. When Daniel had been medically discharged, PTSD, traumatic brain injury, a laundry list of diagnoses that added up to broken. Sargent had been retired too. The Marines had let Daniel adopt him, which was the only good thing the Corps had done for him in the 3 years since. They'd been inseparable, living in a car until the car was repossessed, living in shelters until Sargent's aggression toward strangers got them kicked out, living on the streets because that was what was left. And now Sargent was dying. The limp had started 2 weeks ago. Back left leg, favoring it more each day. Then the coughing. Then the refusal to eat. Daniel had taken him to a free veterinary clinic that served homeless pet owners. Waited 4 hours for a 10-minute examination that delivered news like a gut punch. Bone cancer, advanced stage, spreading fast. Treatment would cost thousands, surgery, chemotherapy, medications. Impossible numbers. Fantasy numbers. But the vet had given him something. A prescription for pain medication that would keep Sargent comfortable. Cost $217 at the pharmacy. Daniel had that much. Almost. He'd been collecting cans for weeks, had scraped together $193 in crumpled bills and loose change. He needed $24 more. Just 24. It might as well have been 24,000. So he'd done what he swore he'd never do. He'd begged. Not with a sign. Not sitting on a corner with a cup. He had too much pride left for that. Too much of the Marine still buried under the wreckage of the man he'd become. Instead, he'd positioned himself outside a popular nightclub called Vanguard, a 3-story establishment with velvet ropes and a doorman and a cover charge that cost more than Daniel spent on food in a week. He stood at a respectful distance from the entrance, Sargent sitting obediently at his side, and when people walked past he'd ask quietly, politely, if they could spare any change. For his dog. For medication. For a brother who'd served. Most people ignored him. Some made eye contact and shook their heads apologetically. A few gave him $1, $2, loose change from their pockets. In 2 hours, he'd collected $11.47. He needed 12 more. Sargent whimpered softly, shifting his weight off his bad leg. The sound cut through Daniel like shrapnel. He knelt down, running his hand over the dog's head, scratching behind his ears the way Sargent loved. Almost there. Buddy, Daniel whispered. Just a little more. You hang on. You hear me? You hang on. The dog's tail wagged once. Trust. Loyalty. Unconditional love, despite everything. Daniel stood back up, steadied himself. His hands were shaking, from cold, from hunger, from the medication he'd skipped that morning because Sargent's pills were more important. The world felt slightly tilted, sounds too loud, lights too bright. The TBI did that sometimes, scrambled his processing, made everything feel like he was operating on a delay. He approached a couple exiting the club, young, well-dressed, laughing about something. "Excuse me," he said, voice hoarse. "I'm a veteran. I'm trying to get medication for my service dog. If you have anything to spare." The woman looked at him with something like pity. The man pulled her away. "Sorry, man. Don't carry cash." They disappeared into the crowd. Daniel returned to his spot. Sargent leaned against his leg, warm and solid and alive. For now. He didn't notice the bouncer watching him with growing irritation. Didn't notice the way the man's expression had shifted from indifference to active hostility. And he definitely didn't notice the man across the street, sitting on a bench with his own German shepherd, observing everything with the cold calculation of someone who recognized a brother in trouble. Sargent had been 5 years old when Daniel first met him. Already trained, already deployed, already a veteran in his own right. Military working dogs didn't get the luxury of a soft life. They were weapons, tools, assets that happened to have fur and a heartbeat. But to the handlers who worked with them, who relied on them, who trusted them with their lives, they were so much more. Daniel remembered the first day they'd been paired. A training facility at Camp Pendleton, a dozen dogs and a dozen Marines being matched based on temperament and capability. Sargent had walked right up to him, sat down, and stared with those intelligent brown eyes that seemed to say, "I've got you if you've got me." And Daniel had. 4-2 deployments, through firefights and foot patrols, and the grinding terror of searching vehicles for explosives that could vaporize you if you missed them. Sargent had been perfect, focused, disciplined, fearless. He'd alerted on 11 IEDs, likely saving 30 lives. He'd attacked an insurgent who'd gotten past the perimeter, taking 3 bullets in the process, but surviving. He'd been there the night Daniel's convoy was ambushed, the night everything went wrong, the night that ended with 3 Marines dead and Daniel's brain rattling inside his skull from a blast wave that didn't leave visible scars. The Corps had called Sargent a hero, had given him a medal, and then had retired him the moment he wasn't useful anymore, just like they'd done with Daniel. Now, Sargent was suffering. The cancer had started in his rear leg, a tumor the size of a golf ball that pressed against bone and nerve. It had metastasized, spread to his lungs, his lymph nodes, his organs. The vet had been kind but honest. Even with treatment, Sargent had maybe 6 months. Without treatment, without pain management, he had weeks. Painful weeks. Daniel couldn't let him suffer. Wouldn't. If he'd failed at everything else, at being a Marine, at being a husband, at being a father, he wouldn't fail Sargent. Which is why he was here, in the cold, begging strangers for money. Pride didn't matter. Dignity didn't matter. Only Sargent mattered. The dog shifted again, a soft whine escaping despite his training to stay quiet. Daniel knelt once more, ignoring the way his knees protested, ignoring the dampness of the sidewalk seeping through his pants. He opened his backpack, pulled out the tin of dog food he'd been saving, popped it open. "Here, buddy. Eat something." Sargent sniffed the food, but didn't eat. That was new. Yesterday he'd still had an appetite. The decline was accelerating. Daniel's chest tightened. Fear. Helplessness. The same feelings he'd had in Ramadi when the bombs went off and all you could do was take cover and hope you'd be whole when the dust settled. "Please," he whispered to the dog, to God, to the universe. "Just a little more time." Across the street, partially obscured by the shadow of a magnolia tree and the warm glow of a street lamp, a man watched. His name was Nathan Cross, and at 34 years old, he'd spent the last 12 years learning how to be a weapon. 6 feet even, lean and corded with the kind of muscle that came from functional fitness, swimming miles in open ocean, running with weighted packs, doing thousands of pull-ups and burpees and exercises that had no name but left you gasping. His hair was dark brown, cut high and tight in military regulation. His eyes were gray-blue, the color of storm clouds over water, and they never stopped moving. Assessment, evaluation, threat detection. Habits burned so deep they were autonomic. He wore civilian clothes, dark jeans, a black leather jacket over a gray Henley, tactical boots that could pass for regular footwear unless you knew what to look for. No visible indicators of military service. No unit patches, no flag pins, nothing that would draw attention. That was intentional. SEALs didn't advertise. At his side, sitting in perfect heel position, was a German shepherd that could have been Sargent's younger sibling. His name was Titan, 4 years old, 85 pounds of pure drive and discipline. Titan was a Navy MWD, military working dog, trained in explosive detection, patrol work, and controlled aggression. On deployment, he wore tactical gear and rode in helicopters. Stateside, he wore a simple collar and leash and looked like any other well-trained pet. But he wasn't a pet. He was a warrior. Just like Nathan. They were on liberty, shore leave, 48 hours of freedom before flying back to Virginia Beach, and then who knew where? Nathan had chosen Charleston because it was far enough from base to feel separate, close enough to get back quickly if recalled, and full of enough history and quiet corners that he could walk and think and process the things he couldn't talk about. The last deployment had been rough, not in the kinetic sense, firefights, raids, the sharp clarity of combat. Rough in the slow, grinding way of missions that went sideways, of intelligence that was wrong, of consequences that haunted you when you closed your eyes. He'd come back different, and he knew it. Everyone knew it. The team doc had strongly suggested he talk to someone. Nathan had nodded and done nothing. He dealt with it the way he always dealt with things, by moving forward, staying busy, focusing on the mission. Tonight's mission was simple. Walk Titan, clear his head, avoid thinking about the things that waited in the dark corners of his mind. But then he'd seen the homeless man, the veteran, obvious from the posture, the jacket, the way he carried himself despite the circumstances. And the dog, the German shepherd that was clearly former military, clearly suffering, clearly loved by a man who had nothing. Nathan had been watching for 20 minutes. Watched the man beg quietly, watched people ignore him, Watched him kneel beside his dog with a tenderness that spoke of deep bond. Watched him open a tin of food and try to coax the animal to eat. Something in Nathan's chest tightened. Recognition. Kinship. The understanding that separated those who'd served from those who hadn't. You knew your brothers when you saw them, even if you'd never met. He was considering approaching, offering money, maybe offering more than money, when the bouncer stepped outside the club. The man was massive, 6'4", easily 300 pounds, with the bulk of someone who lifted heavy and ate heavier. He had a shaved head, a goatee, and the kind of face that suggested he enjoyed his work a little too much. He wore a black shirt with security printed across the back in white letters, sleeves straining against biceps the size of Nathan's thighs. Nathan watched as the bouncer walked directly toward the homeless man. Watched the body language shift from casual to aggressive. Watched the veteran stand, hands up in a placating gesture, clearly trying to de-escalate. Titan's ears pricked forward. The dog sensed tension. Nathan's hand dropped to Titan's head, a silent command, watch. The bouncer was shouting now, loud enough that Nathan could hear pieces of it over the street noise. Told you to leave, loitering, scaring customers, get the hell out of here. The veteran was backing away, hands still up, trying to move, but the dog was having trouble standing, the bad leg buckling. Nathan's jaw tightened. His body shifted into a ready stance, weight balanced, muscles loose, prepared to move fast. The bouncer grabbed the veteran by the jacket, yanked him forward, shoved him back. The man stumbled, nearly fell. And then the bouncer kicked the dog. Steel-toed boot to the ribs. The dog yelped, a sound of pain and shock, and collapsed. Nathan was already moving before his conscious mind registered the decision. The bouncer's name was Derek Vaughn, and he'd spent the last 6 years working security at Charleston's most exclusive nightclubs, earning a reputation as the guy who didn't take shit from anyone. He was 32 years old, former college linebacker, whose dreams of going pro had died with a torn ACL and a realization that he wasn't quite good enough. But he was big enough, mean enough, and connected enough. His uncle owned Vanguard and 2 other clubs in the district, to make a comfortable living intimidating people. He liked the work, liked the power, liked the way people backed down when he squared up to them, the way his size alone solved most problems. He especially liked dealing with the homeless and the drunks, the people nobody cared about, the people who couldn't fight back or file complaints that mattered. And he really didn't like the vagrant who'd been panhandling outside his club for the past 2 hours. Derek had noticed him almost immediately. Hard not to notice a homeless guy with a dog posted up right in the line of sight of paying customers. Bad for business. Bad for the club's image. The kind of thing that could make rich people uncomfortable, make them choose a different venue. He told the guy to move along once already, around 9 p.m. The man had apologized, said he'd leave soon, just needed a little more time. Derek had let it slide because there'd been a crowd, and he didn't want a scene. But it was 11 now. The man was still there, and Derek's patience had run out. He pushed through the club's front doors, the bass from inside thumping against his chest, the cold night-era shock after the overheated interior. The crowd outside, smokers, people on their phones, couples arguing, parted automatically when they saw him coming. They always did. He walked straight to the homeless man, who was kneeling next to his pathetic-looking dog, trying to get it to eat something from a tin. Derek felt a surge of disgust. Animals and homeless people, both dirty, both nuisances, both problems somebody else should be dealing with. "I told you to leave," Derek said, his voice loud and hard, establishing dominance, making sure everyone nearby knew who was in charge. The man looked up, eyes squinting like he was having trouble focusing. "I'm sorry, I'm not bothering anyone. I'm just trying to." "I don't care what you're trying to do." Derek stepped closer, invading the man's space. "You're panhandling in front of my club. You're making customers uncomfortable. You need to go. Now." The man stood slowly, joints popping. Up close, Derek could smell him, sweat, unwashed clothes, the sour scent of someone who lived rough. It made his lip curl. "I just need a few more minutes," the man said, voice quiet but steady. "I'm almost there. $24. That's all I need for my dog's medication. He's sick, he's..." "Not my problem." Derek crossed his arms, making himself bigger. You've got 30 seconds to pack up and leave, or I'm calling the cops. Please. The man's voice cracked. He's dying. I just need 30 seconds. Derek pulled out his phone, made a show of unlocking it. 29. 28. The homeless man looked down at his dog, looked back at Derek. Something flickered in his eyes. Calculation, maybe defiance. Then it died. Resignation took its place. Okay, he said. I'm going. He knelt back down, started trying to get the dog to stand. But the animal couldn't. The back leg wouldn't hold weight. It kept buckling, the dog whimpering with each attempt. Derek felt his irritation spike into anger. This was taking too long. People were watching, filming on their phones probably. He was being made to wait. Move faster, he snapped. I'm trying, the man said, frustration bleeding into his voice. He can't put weight on his leg. Just give me a second. I gave you 30 seconds. Time's up. Derek reached down, grabbed the man by the collar of his jacket, and yanked him to his feet. The action was aggressive, violent, intended to hurt. The man gasped, hands coming up reflexively, and Derek shoved him backward. Hard. The veteran stumbled, arms windmilling, and fell. Hit the wet sidewalk with a grunt of pain. His backpack spilled open, contents scattering, clothes, a water bottle, pill bottles, loose change rolling into the gutter. The dog tried to stand, tried to go to his handler, but couldn't get up. Just lay there, whining. And that's when Derek made his mistake. He stepped toward the dog and kicked it. The kick wasn't playful or accidental. It was deliberate. Steel-toed boot driven into the dog's ribcage with the full force of a 300-pound man behind it. The sound was sickening. Impact of leather on flesh, the crack of something breaking, the immediate yelp of agony. The dog convulsed, tried to drag itself away, couldn't. Just lay there panting, rapid and shallow, eyes wide with pain and confusion. Daniel Cortez, on the ground with rain soaking into his clothes and his belongings scattered around him, felt something inside him crack in a way that had nothing to do with bones. No, he whispered. Then louder, no. He tried to stand, to get to Sergeant, but Derek moved first. The bouncer planted a boot on Daniel's chest, pinning him down. Stay down, Derek said, voice cold. You don't get to tell me what to do. You don't get to ignore me when I tell you to leave. You're nothing. You understand? Nothing. Daniel grabbed at Derek's leg, trying to push it off. Panic and rage overriding thought. Get off me, my dog, you hurt my dog. Your dog is as worthless as you are. Derek pressed down harder, enough to make breathing difficult. Maybe I'm doing you a favor. Thing looks half dead anyway. Probably put it out of its misery. Daniel swung. A wild, uncoordinated punch from the ground that connected with Derek's knee. Not hard enough to hurt, but enough to surprise. Derek stepped back, more from shock than pain, and Daniel scrambled to Sergeant. The dog was still breathing, but something was wrong. Something was broken. Blood flecked the corners of his mouth. Internal injuries. Oh God. Sergeant, I'm here. Daniel murmured, hands running over the dog's body, feeling for damage, trying to assess through the haze of his own panic and the TBI that made everything feel like it was happening underwater. Derek grabbed Daniel by the back of his jacket, lifted him partially off the ground, and threw him into the street. Not onto the sidewalk. Into the street. Into traffic. Daniel hit the wet asphalt hard, pain exploding through his shoulder and hip. Car horns blared. Brakes squealed. He rolled, instinct overriding agony. Got to the curb just as a sedan roared past close enough to feel the displaced air. He was soaked now, muddy water coating him, and when he looked up, Derek was standing over Sergeant. Maybe I should finish what I started, Derek said loud enough for the crowd to hear. Playing to them now, enjoying the attention. Put this thing out of its misery. Would be the humane thing to do, right? He raised his boot over the dog's head. Daniel tried to stand, to run, to do anything, but his body wouldn't cooperate. The impact, the TBI, the exhaustion, everything caught up at once, and his legs just wouldn't work. Please, he begged, voice breaking, not caring about pride anymore, about dignity, about anything except the dog who'd saved his life and was about to die because Daniel couldn't protect him. Please don't. Derek's boot came down, and a hand caught his ankle mid-swing, stopping it like it had hit a wall. Derek's head whipped around. A man stood behind him, not particularly tall, not particularly large, wearing civilian clothes and looking unremarkable except for his eyes. Those eyes were the coldest things Derek had ever seen. I wouldn't, the man said quietly. The crowd had been watching with the detached fascination of people observing a spectacle that didn't involve them. Some had their phones out, recording. Some looked uncomfortable, but not uncomfortable enough to intervene. A few had walked away, not wanting to see what happened next. This was Charleston. This was a wealthy district with expensive clubs and tourists who didn't want their evening ruined by reality. The homeless were a problem for someone else to solve. Violence happened to other people. One man had started forward, a younger guy, college-aged, with the build of someone who worked out, but his girlfriend had grabbed his arm, shaking her head. Too risky. Not worth it. The bouncer was huge and connected. You didn't get involved. So no one had helped. Until Nathan Cross stepped in. He'd been moving the moment Derek kicked the dog, crossing the street with Titan at his side, covering the distance in seconds. He'd assessed the situation and the time it took his boots to hit the opposite curb. Veteran down, injured dog, aggressor in position of power, crowd passive. Threat level moderate. Action required immediate. Titan had matched his pace perfectly, reading Nathan's body language, understanding without words that they were engaging. The dog's posture had shifted, ears forward, muscles coiled, ready to attack on command. Nathan had reached Derek just as the bouncer was about to stomp a dying dog's skull, had caught his ankle with a grip like a steel trap, and now he held it there motionless, looking up at a man who outweighed him by 100 pounds. "Let go," Derek said, trying to jerk his leg free. Nathan's grip didn't budge. No, the word was simple, final, containing volumes. Derek tried again to pull free, failed again. Confusion flickered across his face, then anger. "I said let go. You don't want to do this." "I really do." Nathan released his ankle and stepped back, positioning himself between Derek and the injured dog. Titan moved with him, a shadow menacing. Derek squared up, sizing Nathan up. The stranger was smaller, lighter, didn't look particularly threatening. This was going to be easy. "Walk away, man. This doesn't concern you." Veteran and his service dog being assaulted. "It concerns me." Nathan's voice was level, conversational, like they were discussing weather. But his stance said otherwise, balanced, ready, the posture of someone who'd fought professionally. That's not a service dog. That's a stray mutt and a homeless junkie who won't leave when he's told. Derek gestured to the crowd. "Ask anyone. He's been panhandling here all night. I'm just removing a public nuisance by assaulting him and kicking his dog." Nathan's eyes flicked to Daniel, who was still on the ground, staring up at this stranger with shock and confusion, then to the German Shepherd, who was breathing in rapid, shallow pants. Broken ribs at minimum, maybe lung damage. That's not how this works. This is my club, my property. I can remove whoever I want, however I want. Derek pulled out his phone. "And now I'm calling the cops. You just assaulted a security officer, interfered with my duties. You're about to have a very bad night." Nathan smiled. It was the same smile he'd given insurgents right before raids. "Go ahead. Call them." Derek blinked. People didn't react this way. People backed down. "You're serious?" "Very." Nathan pulled out his own phone, started recording video, aimed it at Derek, then panned to show the injured dog, the homeless man in the street, the scattered belongings. "While you're at it, explain to the responding officers how you threw a disabled veteran into traffic and kicked his service dog. I'm sure they'll be fascinated." Derek's confidence wavered. This wasn't going according to script. He's not disabled. He's a homeless drunk. He's wearing a Marine Corps hoodie, has a military-issue backpack, and that dog is trained. "Watch." Nathan knelt beside Sergeant, careful not to touch, and spoke in a firm but gentle tone. "At ease, Marine." Sergeant's ears pricked. Despite the pain, despite the injury, the dog responded to the command. "Relax slightly. Stop trying to move." Muscle memory from training that went deeper than suffering. Nathan looked back at Derek. Military working dog. Trained response, which makes kicking him assault on a service animal. Federal charge, plus assault on a veteran, plus reckless endangerment. You want to call the cops now, or you want to shut up and walk away? Derek's face reddened, anger and embarrassment warring with uncertainty. Around him, the crowd was no longer just watching passively. People were murmuring, phones definitely recording now. This wasn't playing the way he'd intended. You don't know who you're messing with, Derek said, voice rising. My uncle owns this place. Owns half the clubs in Charleston. One phone call, and you'll be banned from every venue in the city. One more call, and the cops will arrest you, not me. You think you're some kind of hero. You're nobody. Just like him. Nathan stood, facing Derek fully. When he spoke, his voice dropped to something low and dangerous. I'm Petty Officer First Class Nathan Cross, United States Navy, Naval Special Warfare Development Group. And if you ever kick another dog in my presence, you're going to learn exactly what SEALs do to people who hurt the defenseless. The word SEAL hung in the air like a dropped grenade. Derek's expression shifted. Everyone knew what SEALs were. Everyone knew you didn't fuck with them. Now, Nathan continued, voice still calm but laced with command authority. You're going to apologize to this man. You're going to pay for his dog's medical treatment. And then you're going to walk away and never come near him again. Or I document everything, send it to every news outlet in the state, and make you famous for all the wrong reasons. Your choice. 5 seconds. Derek looked around. The crowd was definitely on Nathan's side now. The phones were recording. This was going viral whether he liked it or not. If he escalated, if he fought, he'd lose in the court of public opinion even if he won the physical confrontation. His jaw worked. Pride versus self-preservation. This isn't over, he finally said. Yeah, Nathan replied. It is. Derek turned and walked back to the club, every step radiating humiliated rage. Nathan watched him go, then turned to the homeless veteran still sitting in the street, staring up at him with an expression somewhere between gratitude and disbelief. Let's get your dog some help, Nathan said, extending a hand. Daniel took the offered hand, felt himself pulled to his feet with surprising strength. Up close, the stranger Nathan, he'd said, looked younger than his voice suggested, but his eyes were old. Veteran's eyes, the kind that had seen things. Thank you, Daniel managed, voice rough. I don't thank you. Don't thank me yet. Nathan was already moving to Sergeant, kneeling beside the dog with practiced efficiency. His own German shepherd sat at attention nearby, watching with intelligent eyes. What's his name? Sergeant. He was my MWD. In the Corps. He's sick, cancer. And that kick. Daniel's voice broke. Nathan ran his hands over Sergeant's torso, gentle but thorough. The dog whimpered when Nathan touched his right side. Broken ribs. Maybe punctured lung. He needs a vet. Now, I don't have money. That's why I was. Daniel gestured vaguely at the scattered change on the sidewalk. I need $217 for his pain medication. I have $193. I can't afford emergency vet, I can't. I can. Nathan pulled out his phone, typed rapidly. There's a 24-hour emergency veterinary clinic 3 miles from here. I'm taking you both there. They'll treat him and bill me. Daniel stared. You don't even know me. I know enough. Nathan looked up, meeting Daniel's eyes. Marine Corps. K-9 handler. Deployed to Ramadi based on the unit patch on your backpack. Discharged medical. Probably PTSD and TBI based on your responses and the VA medication bottles. Living rough because the system failed you. And you were about to let yourself get beaten to death, rather than leave your dog behind. That tells me everything I need to know. The assessment was clinical, accurate, and delivered without judgment. Daniel felt something in his chest loosen, the tight knot of shame that came from being seen, being visible in his failure. I can't pay you back, Daniel said. Don't care. Nathan stood, pulled out his wallet, extracted $400 in cash, handed it to Daniel. For the medication, for food, for whatever you need. Daniel's hands trembled as he took the bills. "Why are you doing this?" Nathan's expression shifted, something painful crossing his features before being locked away. "Because when I came back from my first deployment, I was a mess. PTSD, nightmares, couldn't function. And a senior chief I barely knew took me aside. Got me into therapy, made sure I didn't eat my gun. He said we'd take care of our own. So that's what I'm doing." He knelt again, this time speaking to Sargent in a low, soothing tone. "We're going to pick you up now, Marine. It's going to hurt, but we're getting you help. You tracking?" The dog's tail twitched. Acknowledgement. Nathan slid his arms under Sargent's body, lifting with his legs, cradling 80 pounds of injured dog against his chest. He didn't grunt, didn't strain, just stood smoothly and started walking toward a truck parked down the street. Daniel scrambled to gather his scattered belongings, shoving them into his backpack. Someone had stepped on his water bottle, cracking it. Some of his medication had rolled into a storm drain, but he still had the photograph of his daughter. That was what mattered. He jogged to catch up, found Nathan had already placed Sargent gently in the back of a black Ford F-150, laying him on a blanket. Titan jumped in, settling beside Sargent, with the calm authority of a senior dog, letting a junior know he was protected. "Get in," Nathan said, climbing into the driver's seat. Daniel hesitated. Years on the streets taught you not to trust, taught you that kindness often had strings. But when he looked at Nathan, at the set of his shoulders, the command in his posture, the complete lack of pity in his expression, Daniel saw only certainty. He got in. The vet clinic was a bright, sterile facility that smelled like disinfectant and animal fear. Nathan walked in carrying Sargent, Daniel trailing behind, and the night staff took one look at the injured dog and moved immediately. A vet tech led them to an examination room. A veterinarian, Dr. Sarah Okonkwo, according to her badge, entered within minutes, took in Sargent's condition with quick, experienced eyes. "What happened?" she asked, already examining the dog. "He was kicked," Nathan said. "Heavy boot full force, right side ribcage. He's also late-stage cancer, currently untreated." Dr. Okonkwo's expression hardened. She continued her examination, Sargent whimpering occasionally despite obvious efforts to stay stoic. "Broken ribs, definitely. I'm hearing fluid in his right lung. We need x-rays immediately, possibly surgery to address internal bleeding." "Do whatever he needs," Nathan said. "Money isn't an issue." The vet looked at Daniel. "You're the owner?" "Yes, ma'am." "I need your permission to treat." Daniel nodded. "Throat too tight to speak." "Okay." Dr. Okonkwo signaled her tech. They transferred Sargent to a gurney, wheeled him toward the back. The dog's eye stayed locked on Daniel until the door closed. Daniel stood in the empty exam room, trembling, shock catching up. Nathan guided him to a chair, pressed him into it. "He's going to be okay," Nathan said. "You don't know that." "No, but she's a good vet, and they're doing everything possible." Nathan pulled out his phone again. "Right now, we need to deal with the other problem." "What other problem?" "The bouncer, Derek Vaughn. He assaulted you and your dog in front of witnesses. That's criminal, and he's going to retaliate. Men like him always do." Daniel shook his head. "I don't want trouble. I just want Sargent to be okay, and then we'll leave Charleston, go somewhere else. Running doesn't solve anything. Trust me." Nathan's voice was firm. "We document everything. File a police report. Make it official. Then if he comes after you, there's a paper trail. The cops won't care. I'm homeless. He's connected. That's how it works." "Maybe. But we're going to make them care." Nathan stood. "Wait here. I'll be back." He walked out before Daniel could protest. 30 minutes later, 2 police officers arrived. One was older, in his 50s, with the tired expression of someone who'd seen everything. His name tag read Patterson. The other was younger, female, with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. Her tag, Rodriguez. Nathan met them in the waiting room, introduced himself with the formal professionalism of military addressing law enforcement, showed his military ID, the Golden Eagle holographic seal catching the light, and explained the situation concisely. Assault on a veteran and a service dog, by a nightclub bouncer named Derek Vaughn. Witnesses present. Video evidence recorded. Patterson looked skeptical. A homeless man and a sick dog. You sure you want to file a report over this? I'm sure I want you to do your job, Nathan said evenly. Assault is assault regardless of the victim's housing status. And assault on a service animal is a federal offense. Rodriguez stepped in before her partner could respond. We'll take a statement from the victim. You said you have video. Nathan pulled out his phone, showed them the footage he'd recorded, Derek kicking the dog, throwing Daniel into the street, the confrontation afterward. The video was clear, damning, time-stamped. Rodriguez watched with increasing attention. Patterson looked uncomfortable. Derek Vaughn. Patterson said, You know his uncle owns half the clubs downtown. This is going to cause problems. Good, Nathan said. Maybe his uncle will teach him not to assault disabled veterans. Patterson's jaw tightened. He clearly didn't like being told how to do his job by a military guy. But Rodriguez was already pulling out paperwork. We'll take the statement, Rodriguez said, if the victim wants to press charges. He does, Nathan said. I'll make sure of it. They interviewed Daniel in the veterinary clinic's waiting room, his statement halting but clear. Yes, he'd been panhandling. Yes, he'd been asked to leave. Yes, he complied. And then he'd been assaulted, thrown into traffic, and his dog had been kicked. Multiple witnesses. Video evidence. Rodriguez wrote all down. Patterson made a phone call, stepping outside to talk quietly. When he came back in, his expression was neutral. We'll file the report. Detective will follow up in a few days. A few days? Nathan's voice cooled. There's video evidence of assault. You should be arresting him tonight. It's not that simple, Patterson said. We need to interview the bouncer, get his side. His side. Nathan stepped closer, not threateningly, but with presence. His side of kicking a cancer-ridden dog. I'm really curious what justification you think exists. I'm just saying this is going to be complicated. The Vaughns have lawyers. They have connections. Filing charges against Derek means going up against the whole family. And Nathan's expression was cold. Are you telling me you won't enforce the law because someone has connections? Because I can think of several federal agencies that would be interested in that statement. Patterson flushed. I'm not saying that. I'm saying be realistic. Your friend here, he nodded at Daniel, is homeless, probably has a record. I don't have a record, Daniel said quietly. And this is going to come down to his word against Derek's. Who do you think a judge will believe? A judge will believe video evidence, Nathan said, and the testimony of a Navy SEAL who witnessed the assault, and a veterinarian who will document the injuries, and anyone else in that crowd who actually has the courage to come forward. Rodriguez put a hand on her partner's arm. We'll file the report. Properly. With all evidence attached. The DA can decide how to proceed. She looked at Nathan. That's the best we can do right now. It wasn't enough. Nathan could see it in the way Patterson was already mentally dismissing this case. Could see the systemic bias, the way power protected power. But pushing harder right now would only make things worse. Fine, Nathan said. File it. And I want a copy of that report number. Rodriguez provided it. The officers left. Daniel slumped in his chair. That went about how I expected, he said bitterly. They're not going to do anything. Patterson won't, Nathan agreed. But Rodriguez might. And even if they don't, we have documentation. That matters. For what? For when Derek retaliates. Because he will. Nathan was right. The retaliation came before dawn. Daniel and Nathan had spent the rest of the night at the veterinary clinic. Sergeant had survived surgery. The broken ribs had been stabilized, the punctured lung repaired, the internal bleeding stopped. He was sedated, breathing with the help of oxygen, but alive. Dr. Okonkwo had been cautiously optimistic. With rest and care, he'd recover from the injuries. The cancer was still terminal, but the pain medication Nathan had paid for, along with the prescription Daniel had been trying to fill, would keep him comfortable. Nathan had paid for everything without blinking. For $1,000 in emergency veterinary care, like it was nothing. Daniel had tried to refuse, had tried to argue, had finally given up and just said thank you until the words felt meaningless. Around 4 a.m., Nathan had driven Daniel to a motel, nothing fancy, but clean and safe, and paid for a week's stay. Told him to get some sleep, shower, eat. They'd figure out next steps in morning. Daniel had collapsed into the motel bed, the first real bed he'd slept in for months, and been unconscious within minutes. He woke 6 hours later to pounding on the door. Disoriented, he stumbled to answer it. 2 police officers stood outside. Not Patterson and Rodriguez. Different ones. Harder expressions. "Daniel Cortez," the first officer said. "Yes. You're under arrest for assault and public intoxication." Daniel's brain struggled to process. "What? I didn't." They didn't let him finish. Pulled him out of the room, cuffed him, shoved him into a cruiser. He didn't have his phone. Didn't have Nathan's number memorized. Didn't have a lawyer. Didn't have anyone. At the station, he was booked and thrown in a holding cell. Hours passed. No one would tell him what he was being charged with, who had accused him anything. Finally, a detective showed up. Older man, expensive suit, the kind of cop who climbed the ladder by knowing whose ass to kiss. "Mr. Cortez," the detective said, pulling up a chair outside the cell. "I'm Detective Morris. We have a problem." "I didn't do anything," Daniel said. "Derek Vaughn says otherwise. Says you were drunk last night, got aggressive when he asked you to leave, assaulted him, and that he acted in self-defense. Says the man claiming to be a SEAL is your friend who jumped in to help you attack him." "That's bullshit. He has witnesses. Security footage from the club. A medical report showing injuries. I have video too. Nathan recorded everything." "Nathan Cross. The SEAL." Morris smiled thinly. "Funny thing, Mr. Cross isn't at the motel you were staying at. Checked out this morning. Paid in cash. Left no forwarding address. Can't seem to track him down." Daniel's stomach dropped. He wouldn't just leave. "Seems like he did. Which leaves you here, with assault charges, and no one to back up your story." Morris leaned forward. "But here's the good news. The Vaughn family is willing to drop all charges if you sign a statement saying last night's incident was a misunderstanding. You were intoxicated, got aggressive, and they were justified in removing you from the premises. You also agree to leave Charleston immediately and never return. And if I don't sign, then you get charged. Public intoxication, assault on a security officer, resisting. You'll sit in jail for months waiting for trial because you can't afford bail. And when it goes to trial, you'll lose. Because Derek's family has lawyers and judges and money, and you have nothing." Morris slid a piece of paper through the cell bars. "Sign it. Make this easy on yourself." Daniel stared at the paper, at the lie he was being asked to endorse, at the systematic destruction of truth, because he was nobody and Derek Vaughn was somebody. He thought about Sargent, recovering in the veterinary clinic. Thought about the man who'd helped him, who'd promised protection, and then disappeared. Thought about the 20 years he'd given the Marine Corps, fighting for a country that threw him away the moment he was broken. "I'm not signing shit," Daniel said. Morris sighed. "Your funeral." He left. The cell door stayed locked. Daniel sat on the bench, head in his hands, and tried not to break. Nathan Cross had not left Charleston. He'd checked out of the motel Daniel was staying in because he'd anticipated exactly what happened. Retaliation, arrest, systemic pressure designed to make Daniel fold. The Vaughn family was predictable. Powerful people always were. They used the same playbook because it usually worked. But Nathan wasn't playing their game. He'd moved Daniel's belongings to a different location, a short-term rental apartment in a quiet neighborhood, paid for a month in advance under Nathan's name. He checked on Sargent at the vet clinic, confirmed the dog was stable, and arranged for continued care regardless of cost. And then, he'd started making phone calls. The first was to his commanding officer, requesting an extension of his leave. Family emergency. Request granted. The second was to a civilian lawyer he knew through veteran networks, a former Marine JAG officer named Patricia Reeves, who now ran a nonprofit providing legal services to homeless veterans. He explained the situation. She agreed to take Daniel's case pro bono and promised to have Daniel out of jail within hours. The third call was to a friend from his SEAL team, Marcus Webb, who Nathan had served with for 4 years and who was currently stationed at Little Creek in Virginia. Marcus had connections in law enforcement and media. Nathan explained what was happening. Marcus listened, asked a few questions, then said the words Nathan had been counting on. "I'll be there by tonight." The fourth call was to a journalist, Amanda Chun, investigative reporter for the Charleston Post and Courier, who specialized in exposing corruption and abuse of power. Nathan had done his homework, found her articles, read her work, seen that she gave a shit about the truth. He sent her the video, gave her the story, and asked if she was interested. She was. By noon, Daniel was released from jail. Patricia Reeves had torn the charges apart. No evidence of intoxication, video evidence contradicting Derek's statement, illegal arrest without proper cause. The desk sergeant had released Daniel with an apology that sounded more annoyed than sincere. Nathan was waiting outside the station with coffee and a clean set of clothes. Daniel stared at him like he was seeing a ghost. "They said you left." "I did. Strategically." Nathan handed him the coffee. "You okay?" "No." Daniel's hand shook as he took the cup. "They were going to bury me. Make me sign something saying I assaulted Derek, that everything he did was justified." "I know. That's why I called in reinforcements." Nathan gestured to a woman standing nearby. "Daniel Cortez, meet Patricia Reeves. Your lawyer." Patricia stepped forward, extending a hand. She was in her 50s, with short gray hair and the no-nonsense demeanor of someone who'd spent years in military courtrooms. "Mr. Cortez, I've already filed a formal complaint about your unlawful arrest. I've also filed a lawsuit against Derek Vaughn and the Vanguard nightclub for assault, emotional distress, and animal cruelty." Daniel blinked. "I can't afford." "You're not paying. This is pro bono, and we're going to win." Patricia's smile was sharp. "The video evidence alone is enough. But we're also going to nail them for the retaliation, the false charges, and the systemic corruption that allowed it." "How?" "By making this public," Nathan said, "and by making it hurt." Nathan moved Daniel into the rental apartment that afternoon. It was small, one bedroom, basic furniture, but it was clean and safe and had a door that locked. Daniel stood in the middle of the living room, still holding his coffee, looking lost. "You can stay here as long as you need," Nathan said. "Rent's paid for a month. After that, we'll figure something out." "Why are you doing this?" Daniel asked. "You don't owe me anything." Nathan set his backpack down, met Daniel's eyes. "My senior chief, the one I told you about who helped me when I came back fucked up. He killed himself 3 years ago. PTSD. Couldn't get the help he needed. Couldn't carry it anymore. And I've spent every day since wishing I'd done more. Wishing I'd seen the signs, intervened, been there." He paused. "So when I see another veteran drowning, I don't walk away. That's why." Daniel's eyes filled with tears. "I'm sorry. Don't be. Just get your shit together, take care of Sergeant, and pay it forward someday." Nathan pulled out his phone. "Right now, we have work to do." They spent the next several hours building a case. Nathan had already compiled the video evidence, his recording, plus footage from bystanders who'd sent him their videos after seeing his social media posts asking for witnesses. Patricia walked them through what they needed: medical documentation of Sergeant's injuries, Daniel's military service records, proof of the false arrest, witness statements. Nathan worked methodically, making calls, sending emails, coordinating with Marcus, who was digging into Derek Vaughn's background. What Marcus found was damning. 3 prior assault charges, all dismissed. 2 DUIs, both pled down to reckless driving. A pattern of violence that had been covered up by family money and influence. They also found evidence of the Vaughn family's business practices, labor violations, safety complaints, allegations of bribing city officials for permits. Not enough to prosecute on its own, but enough to paint a picture of systematic corruption. Amanda Chun, the journalist, arrived around 4 p.m. She interviewed Daniel for an hour, recording everything: his service in Iraq, his medical discharge, his descent into homelessness, the night Derek assaulted him, and Sergeant. She was thorough, compassionate, and clearly angry on his behalf. "This is going to be a multi-part series," she said when the interview concluded. Veteran failed by the system, assaulted by a connected family, retaliated against by corrupt police. "It's going to run tomorrow, front page." "Will it matter?" Daniel asked. "They have money. Lawyers. They have lawyers. I have the truth. And truth, when it's documented this well, tends to win." Amanda stood, gathering her equipment. "Get some rest, Mr. Cortez. Tomorrow's going to be interesting." After she left, Nathan ordered food, Chinese takeout. More than two people could eat. They ate in silence for a while, Daniel wolfing down the first real meal he'd had in days. "I want to see Sergeant," Daniel said finally. "We'll go tonight, after visiting hours, so it's quieter." Nathan set down his fork. "But first, there's something I want you to do." "What?" "Take a shower. Get clean clothes on. Look in the mirror and remember who you were before all this." Daniel's jaw tightened. "I know who I am. I'm a—" "Don't finish that sentence." Nathan's voice was firm. "You're a Marine, a combat veteran, AK-9 handler who saved lives. You got hit with PTSD and TBI and a system that failed you. But that doesn't define you. What defines you is that you stood in front of your dog and took a beating rather than abandon him. That's who you are." Daniel's throat worked. He nodded, unable to speak. That evening, they visited Sergeant. The dog was awake, groggy from medication but responsive. When Daniel entered the recovery room, Sergeant's tail thumped weakly against the blanket. Daniel knelt beside him, burying his face in the dog's fur, and wept. Nathan gave them space, standing outside with Titan. His own dog sat calmly, watching the reunion through the window with what might have been understanding. Marcus arrived around 8 p.m., tall, dark-haired, with the same coiled intensity that all SEALs seem to carry. He and Nathan did the abbreviated hug-handshake combination that military men used, then got straight to business. "The Vaughns are scrambling," Marcus reported. "Derek's been pulled from the club. Family lawyers are in full damage control mode. They know something's coming." "Good." Nathan's smile was cold. "Let them sweat." They spent the next 2 hours gaming out scenarios, planning for every possible retaliation. Safe houses, legal strategies, media responses. Nathan had learned in the teams that preparation prevented panic. You ran through contingencies until they were second nature, and then when things went sideways you adapted. Around 10 p.m., Daniel emerged from the veterinary clinic, looking more stable. Seeing Sergeant alive and recovering had given him something to hold on to. "He's going to make it," Daniel said. The vet said with treatment, he could have 6 more months. Maybe more. "That's good," Nathan said. 6 months is a long time. A lot can happen. They drove back to the apartment. Nathan and Marcus stayed, sleeping in shifts, maintaining security. Old habits. You didn't leave a brother vulnerable, even stateside. The article hit the next morning at 6 a.m., posted online before the print edition was even distributed. The headline: Homeless Marine Veteran Assaulted by Nightclub Bouncer, then Arrested on False Charges. Video Evidence Exposes Systemic Corruption. Amanda Chin had done her job perfectly. The article laid out everything in excruciating detail. Daniel's service record, Sergeant's history as a military working dog, the assault captured on video, Derek's history of violence, the false arrest, the family's attempts to cover it up. She'd included statements from Patricia Reeves, embedded the video footage, and contextualized it within the larger issue of veteran homelessness and systemic failure. It went viral within hours. By noon, it had been picked up by regional news outlets. By evening, national military news sites were running it. Veterans groups on social media were sharing it with outrage, promising boycotts and protests. The hashtag Justice for Sergeant was trending locally. The public response was overwhelming. Hundreds of comments condemning Derek and the Vaughn family. Donations pouring into Patricia Reeves's nonprofit. People showing up at the Vanguard nightclub to protest, forcing it to close for the day. The Vaughn family released a statement through their lawyers. The allegations against Derek Vaughn are completely false. We have evidence that will exonerate him. This is a politically motivated attack, designed to harm our business. But the video made their statement laughable. Everyone could see Derek kicking the dog, throwing Daniel into traffic. No amount of spin could change that. By the third day, the pressure had reached critical mass. The Charleston Police Department announced an internal investigation into the false arrest. Detective Morris was placed on administrative leave. The DA's office announced they were reviewing the case and considering charges against Derek Vaughn. And then the federal government got involved. An FBI agent named Sarah Watkins reached out to Nathan directly, having been forwarded his information by a contact at NCIS. She wanted to talk about potential civil rights violations, witness intimidation, and systemic corruption in the Charleston Police Department. Nathan, Marcus, Daniel, and Patricia met with Agent Watkins at a federal building downtown. She was mid-40s, professional, with the intensity of someone who took her job seriously. "What you've documented here goes beyond one assault," Agent Watkins said, reviewing the evidence on her laptop. "We're seeing patterns consistent with organized corruption, police protecting a specific family in exchange for political and financial favors. If we can prove that, this becomes a federal case." "Can you prove it?" Patricia asked. "Maybe. We'd need more evidence. Financial records, testimony from other officers, documented cases where the Vaughns received preferential treatment." Agent Watkins looked at Nathan. "You said you have connections in local law enforcement?" "1. Officer Rodriguez. She seemed honest." "Would she cooperate with a federal investigation?" "I think so." "Then we start there." Agent Watkins closed her laptop. "I'm opening a formal investigation. This is going to take time, months, maybe longer. But if you're right about the scope of corruption, we can bring charges that will actually stick." "What about Daniel?" Nathan asked. "He's still vulnerable. Derek's family still has resources." "I can't provide protection, but I can make it very clear to the Vaughns that any further retaliation will be considered witness intimidation in a federal investigation. That usually makes people think twice." It wasn't a guarantee, but it was something. As they left the federal building, Daniel pulled Nathan aside. "How long can you stay?" Daniel asked quietly. "You said you'd leave, but you have to go back eventually." 2 more weeks, Nathan admitted. "Then I'm due back at base." "And after that?" "After that, you'll have Patricia, you'll have the federal investigation, and you'll have a support network." Nathan put a hand on Daniel's shoulder. "You're not alone anymore. Remember that." Daniel nodded, but his expression said he didn't quite believe it yet. The story didn't die. If anything, it grew. By the end of the first week, national news outlets were covering it. CNN ran a segment on veteran homelessness, featuring Daniel's story. Fox News covered it as an example of small-town corruption. Military Times did a deep dive into the failures of the VA system that had contributed to Daniel's situation. Veterans organizations mobilized. The Wounded Warrior Project offered Daniel housing and medical support. SEAL teams across the country reached out to Nathan, offering assistance, donations, anything he needed. The military community closed ranks around one of their own. Local businesses that had partnerships with Vaughn Properties started severing ties. The city council announced a review of all permits and licenses issued to Vaughn Development. Investors pulled funding. Construction projects stalled. Derek Vaughn's uncle, the one who owned the clubs, released a statement announcing that Derek had been terminated and was no longer affiliated with any Vaughn businesses. It was a transparent attempt to distance the family from his actions, but the public wasn't buying it. Protests continued outside the Vanguard nightclub. Not large protests. Charleston wasn't that kind of city, but consistent ones. Veterans in their uniforms holding signs. "Veterans deserve better, and justice for Sergeant, and Derek Vaughn is a coward." The pressure became unbearable. Derek himself stayed silent, hidden behind his lawyers. But his social media accounts, which hadn't been deleted fast enough, were being archived and shared, showing years of entitled behavior, photos with expensive cars, boasts about getting out of legal trouble thanks to family connections. Every post was ammunition. On day 8, the DA announced that formal charges were being filed: assault, animal cruelty, filing a false police report. Derek was arrested, posted bail immediately, and disappeared from public view. But the charges were just the beginning. The FBI investigation was expanding. Agent Watkins had found evidence of financial irregularities in how Vaughn Development secured city contracts. Witnesses were coming forward, other people who'd been harassed or assaulted by Derek and paid off to stay quiet. Police officers who'd been pressured to look the other way. The corruption ran deep, and now that the spotlight was on it, everything was unraveling. Derek Vaughn's trial was scheduled for 6 months out, but he never made it that far. 2 weeks after the charges were filed, facing overwhelming evidence and public pressure, Derek took a plea deal. Guilty to assault and animal cruelty. Sentenced to 18 months in county jail, 5 years probation after release, mandatory anger management, and a permanent ban from working in any security or law enforcement capacity. He also agreed to pay restitution, $50,000 to Daniel for medical expenses, emotional distress, and punitive damages. The sentencing hearing was packed. Daniel attended with Nathan and Patricia, sitting in the gallery, while Derek stood before the judge, looking smaller than he had that night outside the club. The judge, a woman in her 60s with the stern demeanor of someone who'd seen too many entitled young men pass through her courtroom, didn't mince words. Mr. Vaughn, you assaulted a disabled veteran and kicked his service dog in a display of cruelty that shocks the conscience. You then used your family's influence to have the victim falsely arrested and intimidated. Your actions represent everything wrong with a system that protects wealth and power over justice and compassion. She paused. This sentence is lenient compared to what you deserve. If you violate the terms of your probation in any way, you will serve the maximum sentence allowed by law. Do you understand? Derek nodded, voice barely audible. Yes, Your Honor. He was led away in handcuffs. His family sat in the back row, faces carefully neutral. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed. Daniel gave a brief statement, Nathan standing beside him. I don't feel victorious, Daniel said, reading from notes Patricia had helped him prepare. I feel tired, but I'm grateful that justice was served. And I hope my story helps other veterans who feel invisible, who feel like the system doesn't care. You matter. Your service matters. Don't give up. The clip played on every local news station that night. The broader investigation continued. 3 police officers were suspended pending disciplinary hearings. Detective Morris was charged with abuse of power and witness tampering. The Vaughn family's business empire was under federal scrutiny for fraud, bribery, and labor violations. The city of Charleston, embarrassed by the national attention, announced new policies for how police handle complaints involving homeless individuals and veterans. They partnered with local VA services to create a rapid response team for veterans in crisis. It wasn't enough. Systemic change took time, required constant pressure. But it was a start. 3 months after the assault, Daniel Cortez stood in the small apartment that had become his home, packing boxes. He was moving, not back to the streets, but to transitional housing provided by the Wounded Warrior Project, a program specifically for veterans with PTSD and TBI, offering therapy, job training, and a pathway to permanent housing. He'd been accepted after Patricia helped him navigate the application process. Sergeant was with him, moving slowly, but moving. The dog had defied the vet's initial prognosis, responding well to the pain medication and cancer treatment that Nathan had continued to fund. He wasn't cured. Cancer didn't work that way. But he was comfortable, alert, present, and that was enough. Daniel had gained weight, cut his hair, started attending therapy sessions. The TBI symptoms were still there. The PTSD still haunted him, but with consistent medication and support they were manageable. He wasn't fixed. Healing didn't work that way. But he was functional. And that was progress. The $50,000 in restitution from Derek had been split. Half went to Patricia's nonprofit to help other veterans. A quarter went to the emergency vet clinic that had saved Sergeant's life. The remaining quarter Daniel kept for himself, a small financial cushion, the first he'd had in years. He had a job lined up, starting next month. Security work at a VA hospital, coordinating with police and medical staff. Patricia had helped him get it, leveraging his Marine Corps background and K-9 experience. It wasn't glamorous, but it was stable. Honest. A step forward. Nathan was deploying tomorrow. He'd stayed in Charleston longer than planned, but orders were orders. He'd come to say goodbye. They stood in the apartment, Sergeant and Titan sitting side by side like the brothers in arms they were. "You're going to be okay," Nathan said. It wasn't a question. "Yeah," Daniel replied. "I think I am." "You've got my number. You've got Patricia. You've got the program. You've got resources. Use them." "I will." Daniel extended his hand. Nathan shook it, then pulled him into a brief, hard hug. "Semper Fi Marine," Nathan said. "Thank you," Daniel whispered. "For everything." Nathan stepped back, knelt to scratch Sergeant's ears. "Take care of him. He's a good one." Sergeant's tail wagged. Nathan and Titan left. Daniel watched from the window as they drove away, then turned back to his apartment, his home, his new start. It wasn't perfect, but it was his. Nathan Cross deployed the next morning, headed back to Virginia Beach, and then to classified locations doing classified work. Marcus Webb returned to his own team. Agent Watkins continued her investigation. Amanda Chen won an award for her journalism. Life moved forward. 6 months later, Daniel sent Nathan a photo. It showed Daniel in his security uniform, standing beside Sergeant, both of them looking healthy and whole. The message read, 6 months cancer-free, starting training to become a therapy dog team for other veterans. Thank you for believing in us. Nathan saved the photo, added it to a collection he kept of the people he'd helped over the years. Reminders that sometimes the fight wasn't overseas. Sometimes it was right here, standing up for the person everyone else ignored. He thought about his senior chief, the man who'd saved him, who hadn't been able to save himself. Hoped that wherever he was, he knew Nathan was paying it forward. In a world where power protects power, where systems fail the vulnerable and money buys immunity, sometimes justice requires someone willing to stand in the gap. Not because it's easy, not because there's a reward, but because it's right. Daniel Cortez ran into traffic to save his dog. Nathan Cross stepped between a bouncer and a veteran because he couldn't walk away. Sergeant survived because people who'd never met him decided he mattered. The powerful aren't untouchable. They just act like it until someone calls their bluff. And when enough people stand together, veterans supporting veterans, journalists exposing truth, lawyers fighting pro bono, citizens demanding accountability, the walls start to crack. This story isn't about heroes and villains in some distant war zone. It's about the battles fought on city streets, in courtrooms, in the quiet moments when you decide whether to look away or step forward. It's about the choice we all face. Ignore suffering because it's inconvenient, or intervene because someone's life depends on it. If this story touched you, share it. If you see a veteran struggling, help them. If you witness injustice, document it. Be the person who stands in the gap. And always, always protect those who cannot protect themselves, whether they have 2 legs or 4. Until next time, remember, the powerful aren't untouchable when the right person is watching. And sometimes, the right person is you.